Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue our journey watching The Bachelorette. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. A lot of you have been asking that I watch this particular episode, the second episode of the season, because apparently there's some sort of therapy scene, so let's get to the show.
Well, we're going to step through love languages. You guys know the love languages? Yeah. If you don't worry, you're about to learn.
Love languages are how we express love. Today's date is going to be really...
Okay, interesting. So they're bringing up the concept of love languages. Many of you might at least be peripherally aware of that concept. Maybe some of you have actually read the book and are using that concept in your relationships. Essentially, the idea is that everyone has different ways of showing love. They have a preference in the way that they like to show that they love someone, and they have a preference in the way they like to receive love. And the idea goes is that if you have a mismatch in love language, you might not receive or understand the other person is trying to show you that they love you. Some people are very verbal with their expressions of love. They'll say, I love you a lot. They'll say a lot of things that indicate verbally that they love the other person. Another person, according to the concept, they might express it through gifts. They might not be very verbal. In fact, they might not ever say it verbally, but they give a lot of gifts. Another person might be loyal. Another person might be there, show up all the time. Another person, it might be physical affection, this sort of thing. Now, there's a lot of pseudoscience around this. Psychology, we have ways of testing these ideas. There are thousands upon thousands of theories put forth by various different people, including like a theory like the love language theory. And we have to put it to the test. Does it stand the test of empirical science when we actually observe people? And is it a helpful model in predicting behavior? Maybe as they talk about this, we'll get into it. But long story short, love languages isn't a very effective way of, one, understanding people and predicting behavior. It's a totally valid way of exploring things, of the many, many things one might explore in a relationship. How do I like to show I love someone? How do I like to be shown that someone loves me? How does my partner prefer that I show them I love them? Maybe I have to adjust to their way of expressing and receiving love, and they have to adjust to me. Those are very worthy conversations, but in terms of science and in terms of predicting behavior and personality measurement, the concept isn't very useful. In fact, in my field, couples therapy, psychology, people don't usually talk about love languages. There's all sorts of other measures and personality tests and behavior measures that we will use. And love language, it's a popular idea that somehow caught on with the public. Same thing with the 5 stages of grief. That is not shown to be empirically sound. But somehow, for whatever reason, these ideas just get propagated through society. And then some clinicians actually glom onto it because they don't know how to look up the research otherwise. But anyway, there is some validity to it, but maybe I'll talk about that as we watch this.
how they're expressing themselves, and if they can.
All right, so that's actually interesting that she is saying, I want to find out how they give love and receive love, and if they can give love and receive love. So that's a different kind of a question, right? One is how do they receive love and give love? And the other one is, can they, or do they do it in a way that vibes with me? That's a different question than love language terminology. But anyway, let's continue watching. So the idea goes is that optimally you share each other's love language. It makes things easier. You're able to express in the natural way that you do. It's received in an accurate way. And research has actually looked into this because, you can have measurements of what someone's love language is, and then you can see if their spouse, what their love language is, and then you can ask them how satisfied they are in the relationship, or you can track how long the relationship has been going. And according to research, there is no signal there from the little bit that I read that having a shared love language or even adjusting your love language doesn't necessarily predict relationship satisfaction. Because relationship satisfaction involves a lot of different factors. And it's hard to predict those kinds of things. Science has tried to predict this sort of thing. There's a lot of things that you can actually look at behaviorally, like what John Gottman found is there contempt in the relationship? Is there stonewalling? These sorts of things. And those things do tend to predict whether or not a relationship is going to last and whether or not it's satisfactory to the members. But there's a lot of other things that play into why people would develop contempt between each other, or why they would stonewall each other, why they would be defensive with each other. And what I'll say from my experience is, regardless of love language matching, it's important that each person understand their own relationship triggers, their own attachment triggers, and they understand their own emotions and they're able to communicate that. And you could call that one of the love languages, I guess, of just like being verbal, but I think that that's important for everybody. But having said that, it is, I think, helpful to have a conversation or to think about, how do I express love? And it's not just romantic relationships, it's family relationships as well. Sometimes generations or different ethnicities, even in your own family, will express love in different ways. Some people express love by feeding you a lot of food. And for you to eat their food, it means that you are accepting their love. Another family, it might be showing up for events. Another family, it might be gifts or cards or whatever. Facebook expressions of love, right? Happy birthday, so-and-so. And other people, it's like they don't really care about that. So inquiring that for yourself, thinking about how other people like to receive love, it's a very worthy conversation. Whether or not the book codifies that into any meaningful way is not necessarily shown in the data, but the larger question that the book, I think, alerts us all to is a really great question.
I'm a little bit taken aback. I'm sitting here, I had made a toast, and then there was the longest awkward silence. And I just sat here and was embarrassed and had to does anybody want to spend time with me?
From what we were presented, she sat down and everything was going fine and they're all talking to her. And it's that kind of awkward situation where all the guys are trying to get with one woman and she's trying to be polite to everyone, even though she's clearly said that she's really into just one of the guys. Then she apparently was expecting people to jump at the chance to pull her aside and have a one-on-one with her. And apparently none of them did, except for one guy eventually did. There was sort of an awkward pause there. And she interpreted it as they didn't step up to the plate. I got the impression all the guys would have absolutely jumped at the chance to be alone with her. So I suspect that they just didn't understand the situation. They didn't understand that that was what they were supposed to do, or they didn't want to step ahead of their buddies or whatever. So she's upset. And I think what's happening is that she's hurt. She feels like they don't really care about her, and that hurt her. And so she is now communicating that. She is being a little accusatory towards them, which I don't think is fair. Who knows? But I don't think any of those guys up until this point have shown that they're not 110% trying to be with her, because it certainly seems that way. Who knows? Now, maybe some of the guys were picking up on the pretty overt preference that she has for Dale, and they don't want to really put themselves out there or embarrass themselves, or maybe they don't even want to impose on her. They're going to be like, oh, clearly she wants to be with Dale, so maybe Dale and her should hang out, and I'm guessing we're all going to lose, but, might as well make the most. I don't know. But she's upset, and so she just communicated that, and let's see how this goes.
Manipulative.
Needy.
Selfish.
I'm a bitch.
Who knows what they exactly mean by those words? There's a lot of different things that needy would mean and manipulative would mean. I think it's a great first date activity, honestly. At least that's my style. I like to be honest with people, and it's a wonderful thing to get to know people with, right? I'm sure it's not everyone's style to be this vulnerable or even ever be this vulnerable with your partner. I don't know. But it's great. I think kudos to them for really opening up. She said needy, and she also said a B word, for herself. Now, I don't know, but that's commonly words that I will hear people who are preoccupied attachment. They will describe themselves that way. I don't know, but just to talk about preoccupied attachment. I use this show as a way of jumping off and talking about other things that are probably unrelated to the show in some ways, but to talk about preoccupied attachment. For some people, when they're young, they are not given enough consistent love and attention. And through neglect or abuse or chaos or divorce or abandonment or something. And the child has a conundrum. They are sitting there noticing at the age of 2 years old that they're not getting the love and attention that they need. They're not cognitively aware of this process, but they feel it very viscerally. 2-year-olds desperately need love and attention very, very frequently. And when they're not getting it, they know it. And when they're not getting it chronically, they cross a threshold and they have to figure out for themselves how they're going to cope with that. One of the ways that humans will cope with it very commonly is to lean into relationships by demanding love and attention, by being noticeable, by being loud, by saying, hey, pay attention to me, by being very angry when people aren't there for you and really making sure other people know that you don't like the fact that they treated you badly. And I could go on and on about this. This is pretty complicated. Listen to my several hours of deep dive on attachment theory for more information on this. But that's it in a nutshell. And what that will look like in terms of descriptors to adults sometimes will be needy. They will call themselves needy, or they'll be called needy. They'll say, oh my God, you're so needy all the time. Well, everyone is needy. Everyone has a lot of attachment needs. And for those of us that trust other people to love us and cultivate secure relationships, our neediness is frequently satisfied by other people. We give bids for love and attention. The other person receives that and gives us love and attention. There's various different ways that we can do that functionally. And thus, everyone is needy. Now, for those who don't trust other people because of experience that show them otherwise, that they aren't going to get love and attention in a consistent way, that they either will pull away from relationships and will label themselves as the opposite of needy, which is very independent, meaning that they believe that, or they convince themselves that they don't have needs, even though they very, very much do. Or the other end of the spectrum is to lean into relationships and to express your neediness very often so that other people can meet your needs, because you're assuming that other people are always pulling away from you and they'll never actually meet your needs. The problem is when you're very frequently demanding or accusing or being hostile or being needy, as people will perceive it, it will often cause people to move away from you. Not because they don't like your neediness, because people in relationships, they like being needed. One of the most central features of love in a close relationship, whether it's friendship, family, or otherwise, is that this person needs me, and I feel good because they don't need just anyone. They need me, and that feels good. It feels good to, oh, they need me, and I can give them that. So neediness isn't the problem. The problem is when the person, the preoccupied or needy person will accuse the other person and say, you are you're a cold robot, or you never love me, or you never compliment me, or these kinds of real angry, hostile statements that come from a very real place, but really make the other person feel hurt and afraid, and that causes them to pull away. Thus, you, throughout your life as a preoccupied person, unbeknownst to yourself, if you don't go to therapy and learn this about yourself, then you run the risk of actually pushing people away and compounding the trauma for yourself that everyone is going to move away from you. No one will ever love you. And then people will turn 40 years old and look back on their life and they'll see this pattern and they'll think, maybe it's not the world, maybe it's me. And then they go to therapy, and then we can begin the process of investigating that and healing that. In a nutshell, through earned security, as we call it, meaning that when you have secure relationships that are stable and there for you and caring and dedicated and loyal and warm and empathetic and all those kinds of things, if you have that for a long period of time, you learn, oh, I can trust other people, and I am lovable, and I don't have to express my neediness all the time in a way that's accusatory. And I don't feel hurt as often because I trust that the other person loves me. Even though they just did something that hurt my feelings, I mostly trust that they do love me. So through earned security, we can actually learn in our neurons, in our bones, that we're lovable and that other people can be trusted. And only through experience do we gain that. And that's where therapy comes into play a lot of times, is with a attachment-oriented therapist, interpersonal humanistic therapist, who will take the time to really build a strong relationship with you. Then you learn through that experience, and then you can generalize that learning to the rest of the world and start to create secure relationships with other people. So I don't know if she is talking about that, but those two words often preoccupied people will identify for themselves. They'll say, I'm very needy, or I've been called needy, and I'm a B word, because when I get hurt, I get real angry because I really want people to know that they hurt me. And I learned when I was 2 years old, that was the only way to get people's attention so I could get my needs met.
I've held everything in. I always thought I just want to be by myself, just go out and do my own thing, just hook up with anybody. And maybe that was sufficient for me. No, I didn't like that.
All right, so we're hearing about his fears and his insecurities, that he copes with that by trying to be alone all the time. And it's hard to know, it depends, but it usually indicates some attachment insecurity, perhaps what we call avoidant, which is one of the other main categories of attachment coping. Instead of being preoccupied, and meaning that you're very worried about what the other person is doing, you're very focused on the other person and trying to please them and very reactive to them, you will pull away from relationships at the age of 2 or 1 or 3 in that zone. And you'll say, you know what, I'm not getting what I need enough, and I give up. I'm just going to be on my own over here. I don't need other people. I can do things on my own. These people are often very independent. They can live alone. They can do things alone. They don't ask for help. They might not even care to ask for help. And he's describing that kind of. They also can be promiscuous sometimes. There's nothing wrong with promiscuity, but the idea is that as they're trying to get their attachment needs met, they're very worried that the other person is going to neglect them, and so they only have very short relationships because they're trying to get a little bit of their attachment needs met, but very quickly they're worried the other person is going to leave them, or they're just chronically assuming the other person is going to neglect them. And so they'll only dip in and out of relationships, a lot of different relationships, because deep down they're still trying to have an attachment with someone, a loyalty, a love, a connection, a dedication, a security, a longevity, but they assume it's just not going to happen. And so it's like, well, why get involved? It's good. It's something bad is going to happen. So I'm fine. I don't need people. I'm cool. Everything's fine. You know what? I'll just get together with people, because again, that part of them is compelling them towards people. But when they get close, it's like, wow, this is too much. And so they back away. Or they just avoid relationships altogether, which some people will do as well. Now, I hesitate to delineate that way, because for some preoccupied people who are very preoccupied with relationships, it will become so great, their anxiety and distress and upsetness and hurt will become so great at a certain point, they will also pull away from relationships for a while at times. So some people will email me and they'll be like, sometimes I feel preoccupied, sometimes I feel avoidant. Which one am I? Well, if you're asking, it's hard to know. Of course, you want to talk with a therapist about it, but it's possible that you're preoccupied, and past a certain threshold, you very temporarily dip into an avoidant style, but ultimately your foundation is preoccupied. There's also the possibility, and many people are like this, where they have mixed. They, in some situations, will act preoccupied. In other situations, they'll act avoidant. Some situations, they'll act secure. So to think that people are somehow, you give them a blood test and it's like, oh, you have, O-type blood, type O blood. It's not like that. It's a conceptualization. The key is to understand when you are having a threat to your attachment, when you feel like someone is pulling away from you, or someone is hurting your feelings, or you're not getting enough love and attention, or you need love and connection with someone, and you're worried about it not working out, what do? What's your coping style? How do you deal with that? Do you lean in and get angry and hostile? Do you lean away and say, you know what? I'm okay. I don't need people. there's no point in getting wrapped up in all that mess. Too messy for me. I'm okay. I like my little place. I have my cats and my dog, and that's fine. Or do you say, you know what? I'm going to head into this. I hope it goes well. I think this is going to go well. I think I can trust the other person, but I don't know. So I'll give it a try, and I'll ask in a way that assumes that they're a good person, is trusting of the other person's goodness, give the other person the benefit of the doubt. There's a lot of things I can say about this because there's a lot of different experiences that exemplify or are the manifestation of our attachment worries. But when you answer that question for yourself, you might find that, well, sometimes I tend to get angry and hostile as a way of trying to demand that people pay attention to me and that people understand how much they hurt me, and I will sometimes come across real strong to people. And other times, I find myself pulling away, and other times I seem to be very functional, and I'll be non-accusatory and give someone the benefit of the doubt and be clear with my communication. So we will vary our reactivity based on the context, our mood, where the relationship is at. If you feel like, ooh, this relationship is very secure, then you're going to act more functional. You're going to not be avoidant and preoccupied as much in a secure relationship. So just keep that in mind as you think about it for yourself. And of course, find an attachment-based therapist to explore this with. It is really one of the most powerful ideas in my personal life and in my professional life.
Every time I've let my guard down, it always gets too deep for somebody. It always gets too much. I do have genuine feelings for Claire.
All right, so we hear a little bit more. Whenever I open up, it's always too much for someone. I would want to know what that meant. I also wonder if he has a schema of defectiveness. There's a whole other thing called schema therapy, which is related to attachment theory. But there are 18 different schemas that were developed by the developers of the theory that I find to be very useful. One of the schemas is defectiveness, meaning that due to our early relationships, we believe that there's something deeply defective about us, that if people got to know us, they would surely not like the real us because deep down we're dirty or filthy or wrong or unethical or unappealing or something about us deep down. The real us is defective. We're incompetent. We're just bad people. We have bad things about us. And we were taught that growing up through interactions with other people, and then we carry that schema into our adult life and basically see the world through that lens of just like, well, yeah, sure, she says she likes me, but, if she knew the real me, I mean, boy, so I have to make sure I trick everyone about this other me so that I can get love and attention. And even though they're giving me love and attention, it's not real because if they knew the real me, they wouldn't give me love and attention. And so it's this catch-22 that they run into, a vicious cycle for themselves. He seems to be exhibiting a couple signs of that. I don't know, of course, I'd have to ask him, but that's one of the things that we're hearing there.
I would always go for those guys that were shut down, that were players, that were hard to love, didn't want to open up.
All right, again, this is total speculation based on very little information, but preoccupied people and avoidant people often will be attracted to each other. There's research on this topic, actually, and it's really complicated, but I have seen a configuration of relationship between preoccupied and avoidant. And I've talked about this before, but just briefly. For the preoccupied person, again, they are assuming that they're not going to get their needs met because their needs weren't sufficiently met when they were growing up. And so they're walking around in a constant state of insecurity. They're just worried like, no one's going to love me. I'm not lovable. I'm too needy. Do people love me? Does that person love me? Is that person going to cheat on me? Is that person going to leave me? These kinds of that's where the word preoccupied comes from, is because it's a preoccupation with attachment loss. It's just a constant anxiety about losing attachments or not getting any attachments. It's every day, throughout the day. I texted him, when's he going to text me back? Or I said a nice thing to him. Is he going to say a nice thing to me? Or he seems real cold today, or she seems real cold today. Is she going to show me that she loves me? It's a lot of worries about it because when the child was 2 years old, they were made to be worried about it because all 2-year-olds are worried about it. But the way that the parenting worked and the system worked out between child and caregivers was such that if the child focused on the worry and the anxiety, it would amplify the anxiety and thus amplify the reactivity and thus amplify the response, because when you're very reactive to attachment threat, people know. If you scream and cry at the age of 2, people eventually pay attention to you. If you get real angry when, daddy doesn't come home on time and you really just, punish him a lot, if he's neglecting you, he'll eventually pay attention to you. It's in a nutshell. I'm exaggerating for effect, but my point is that for the preoccupied person, there's a lot of anxiety. To the avoidant person, they also were not getting their needs met. And there's a lot of speculation as to what bifurcates these two. They're both insecure attachments. Basically, both people, avoidant, preoccupied, are insecure about getting their attachment needs met. And they're very easily hurt by attachment threats because it's been chronic attachment denial and deficit throughout their entire life. And so they're very sensitive naturally to attachment loss or signs of attachment loss. To the avoidant person, when they were young, they just gave up. So they didn't signal to other people and they just turned themselves off. They look away. Sometimes they don't have a lot of eye contact for that reason. They also will tend to not even notice their own emotions. A lot of people with avoidant attachment will, if you ask them how they feel, they'll be like, I don't know, I'm fine. And they're being honest because that's what they're noticing. Deep down, though, they have all the same feelings as the preoccupied person. The thing I like to say is underneath the surface of every avoidant person is a preoccupied person. The preoccupied person just makes it known to everyone. They learned early in life that if they make it known, instead of only getting this much of their attachment needs met, they'll get a little bit more. So it's better to, make a lot of noise and a lot of activity and notice your own emotional reactivity and, signal it very frequently, because instead of only getting, 10% of your attachment needs, you'll get like 15%, which, is a gain, a 50% gain in attachment needs being met. To the avoidant person, they just decided, I give up. I'm not going to signal it. In fact, I'm not even going to notice it. And they will walk around feeling like they don't have feelings, but they have feelings, and the feelings are coming out in various different ways. A lot of people will drink or smoke pot or other kinds of substances or other kinds of activities to dampen down those feelings as they keep coming up. A lot of them will get very angry because anger is more easily manifested. It's a safer emotion for whatever reason than vulnerability. And so the appeal of the preoccupied and the avoidant person towards each other is that the preoccupied person pursues while the avoidant person distances. When they're optimal, the preoccupied person is giving a lot of signals of neediness and alerting the two of them, the system, to the attachment needs. The preoccupied person is very much like, we need to connect. You need to contact me. We need to hang out. We need to have more romance. We need to look into each other's eyes. We need to talk more. We need to talk about feelings. And so the preoccupied person, because they're so scared, they bring up those topics very frequently. Both of them want to talk about those things, but the avoidant person doesn't want to bring it up for not only just consciously, but even unconsciously. They're not aware of these things. And so as the preoccupied person gives up a lot of those ideas to the conversation and to the relationship of just like, let's hang out, let's be together, let's look into each other's eyes. I love you. I need you. There are a lot of grasping at the other person. And the avoidant person, if when things are going well enough and there's not a lot of conflict, they will allow themselves to be grabbed at. And so for the avoidant person, they get the benefit of the preoccupied person chasing them because they're not going to chase because they're too afraid of chasing. And so they'll just sit there, and the preoccupied person will make the contact. Optimally, that can actually work. Having a preoccupied and an avoidant person together doesn't guarantee terrible things. In fact, research shows a lot of those kinds of couples can do fine. There's work you got to do. There's awareness and how you interpret each other and that sort of thing. It can be done for sure. But it also can result, if it gets off kilter, in a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of distress and conflict, where the preoccupied person is like, you're unavailable, you lied to me, you gaslit me, you were not, you never loved me. And the avoidant person is like, you're psycho. All you do is yell at me. You're crazy. You see problems when there aren't any. All you want to do is talk and talk, and can't we just enjoy ourselves? And so that's the common conflict between those two people. So I don't know about these two here. There's not enough to go off of what they're saying, but there's a little bit of indication that for Claire, at least, she's talking about maybe she is preoccupied and she's been with a lot of avoidant people and it has gone wrong in that way. And what I do with people in couples therapy is I will help the avoidant person to understand their attachment style and to get in touch with their vulnerability. If I do it right, the avoidant person will really enjoy that process, because as I help them to express their needs and to have their needs be met by me and their spouse, they, for the first time, are like emerging like a turtle out of a shell. And they're like, wait, there's a big world out there that I can actually interact with and get my needs met. So there's a lot of joy there. There's a lot of fear there and a lot to work on. It takes a long time. To the preoccupied person, a very similar thing of acknowledging, becoming aware of their attachment needs, getting to know their underlying feelings of hurt and fear, and being able to express that and being heard and understood and taken care of without having to resort to hostility. And the three of us in couples therapy will do that experientially over and over and over again. And it does wonders for people, I'm telling you. Like I said, even in my personal life.
I think we should play strip dodgeball.
What? Okay. This tournament is over when the losing team has nothing on.
What? I hope that they were told about this possibility before they came on the show, because that's quite something to spring on them in the moment. Because of course they have to say yes, right? They can't be like, nope, I'm out, and embarrass themselves on international television. So they have to go along with it. Just imagine if the genders were reversed, and of course it's not an apples to apples comparison, of course, but just for the sake of the thought of experiment, think about that. If it was on The Bachelor, right, which is a guy and a bunch of women, and the women were playing dodgeball, and the guy said strip, wouldn't we say, come on, that's going a little too far. I mean, you can put these guys through a lot, but there should be a line, and that seems like a line. Unless they got consent. Like, by the way, when you agree to come on the show, you're agreeing to the possibility of stripping naked in front of the television cameras and in front of all these other people. Do you consent to that prior to coming on the show? If they had that consent, then great, but I don't know if that happened. Maybe it did.
I want to open up my own gym.
Okay.
When I just had confidence that, I don't know, doors would open to what I ultimately wanted.
Oh, nice.
And that I want a fitness director.
By the way, I don't know if they're just showing us this side of things, but I find that a lot of the guys are doing a lot of the talking, and they're not asking a lot of questions of her, and she's a really good listener, and she's very attentive and very caring and polite, and you just see her very much listening to each of the guys. And very few of the guys, maybe Dale might be the only one that does this, I don't know, are stopping and saying, what about you? You know, there are some efforts along those lines, but then it very quickly comes back to the men. I don't know if that's the sort of guy they chose, or that's how good of a listener she is, or the guys are nervous and they're trying to show off, make an impression. I don't know what's happening, but it's just a comment that I have.
There's a lot of guys here that say they like my drive, or they like what I have to offer, or they like that I stood up for myself. I mean, just anything other than my looks.
No, of course, but they didn't know that. They didn't know that prior to coming on the show, which is...
They did know that prior to coming on the show, because a lot of them have said that.
So I'm trying to understand what the conflict here is. I'm a little lost. I think what she is saying is that this guy isn't saying similar things that the other guys are saying. And he seems quite rattled, honestly. I feel bad for him. I think what the guy is saying is that he doesn't know her very well. He needs to get to know her. And that's one of the things I've been thinking about is a lot of the guys seem to already think they know her from, I guess, watching the show. I've never watched any of these other shows, so if I just met her, I would say, like, you know what, I have no idea who you are. Maybe you're a terrible person. I don't know. Now, of course, none of the guys say that sort of thing, but that would be the rational thing to say. And honestly, if I was Claire, I would appreciate that. The idea that all these guys are automatically in love with you without getting to know you seems to me a little suspect, honestly. It's like, so you've already fallen in love with me. You're already sure you want to be with me and you don't even know me. You're basing that decision on watching a TV show. Like, what kind of moron are you? Of course, that would have, really diminished the idea of the whole show. But anyway, that seems to be what she's saying is the other guys have watched the show. They know my personality and they want to be with me because of what they respect in me, what they see in me prior to the show. And this guy is saying, how am I supposed to know you? That's why we're talking. I want to get to know you. She seems like she's really turned on this guy, which, again, I might not be understanding the context, but that seems how it's going. Now, there's nothing wrong with her saying, like, you know what? I don't like this guy. He's not being very kind to me, or he seems to be sort of checked out, something like that. She's got to whittle him down somehow.
I have a really great group of guys here, and I think I'm gonna have to focus more on them. I don't think that I want to pursue this anymore with you.
Okay.
So, is it okay if I walk you out?
Wow. I don't know. Maybe I missed something, but that seems really mean. Is this how it happens with all the dudes? I mean, he looks like he's about to cry. Again, maybe I missed something and he completely stepped in it or something. There's nothing wrong with Claire being like, yeah, I'm not really feeling it with this guy. He doesn't seem that into me, or I'm just getting a weird vibe, or I've got to get rid of someone. And you can let people down nicely, can't you?
I'm here having in-depth, deep, heartfelt, sincere conversations with making me feel so good and talking about things that they appreciate about me. Brandon can't even think of one thing.
Yeah, so I could absolutely see that being a reality and rational. On the other hand, this whole time, like I've been saying, I've been thinking, how do these guys know that they like her? They don't know her. They've watched her on a TV show. They've briefly interacted with cameras all over them. How in the world would they know if she is a good person, someone that they want to be with, someone that they share a sense of humor and a lot of things in common? It usually takes months of dating to figure that out with someone. So the fact that he wasn't just overflowing with reasons why he knows she's an awesome fit and a wonderful person, to me seems like a rational, normal attitude. Now, maybe he's a jerk face and he is into himself. Who knows? I could see both sides, honestly.
I definitely thought I was going to get the group date rose. I got to bring it and just focus on our connection and let her know how I feel about her, and hopefully that'll kind of further our relationship.
I also find it interesting as a sociological experiment that all the guys seem quite sure that she's going to pick them. It's something that they all say. I don't know if they're just trying to stay positive, or they're being given that impression, or it's just the right attitude to have, because to be a bummer and to be realistic is to maybe get voted off the show, or I don't know. But from the outside, it's interesting to note that so many of them, not all of them, at least overtly, but many of them overtly will say, we have a connection. She's definitely going to pick me. I can feel it. There's a connection there. I mean, the guy that she just booted off even kind of started with that. He said, well, I just know there's a connection between us, and so I just want to build on that. She's like, there's no connection. In fact, you're gone. And so I find it interesting. Is it the kind of person who signs up to be on this show? Do they have a lot of confidence? Is it just the nature of being on the show? Like, you have to believe, otherwise why be on? Because as I was saying from the beginning, you have something like a little bit over a 3% chance of being chosen. Now, we all know she's going to choose Dale. So unless your name is Dale, you're not going to get chosen at all, presumably. But since there are 30 guys, you have a 3% chance of being the one, a little bit over 3% chance of lasting until the end. So the assumption that you should make is, no, I'm not going to make it. It'd be like buying a lottery ticket and assuming that you're going to win, and you start like spending all your money and making all these plans that you're going to win the lottery. Now, of course, it's a lot higher odds to win the lottery, but you get my point. It's not in your favor, let's just put it that way. But it is interesting. And I would want to know if I could talk to them. And I know some of y'all actually will watch this show. So if you're one of these people on the show, and I actually know someone that's been on the show before, is it that you just always feel that way, or do you recognize the mathematical improbability, but you just say that you're going to win because you might as well be positive, or the cameras are on you and you want to try to build up your case, and so you want to really believe? I don't know what's happening there.
I liked you a lot more before you humiliated me. Like, that's ridiculous, man.
You wouldn't have stripped?
Oh, hell no. Hell no. Not in a million years. Have respect for myself and my daughter,
Okay, interesting. So as I was saying earlier, I was wondering if any of these guys signed off on the idea that they were going to be, and they actually weren't entirely naked, but they were very close. And at least one of the fellas is saying, if they would have asked me prior to that, I would have said, I'm not stripping on this national TV show. Like, no. I agreed to a lot of things, but I didn't agree to that. And he brings up an interesting point of, I have a daughter that is going to watch this show, and I don't want that on television. That's humiliating to me. And like I said, it's not apples to apples, of course, because gender is very fraught with a lot of different associations. But if we reverse the gender and there was a bunch of women and the man said, you're going to play strip dodgeball, I think they would have canceled the show over that sort of thing. The whole thing would have been off if they aired an episode like that, or at least I hope there would be. And so I find that to be pretty problematic. And I'm glad that one of the guys is stepping forward and saying, I didn't like that. That was not cool.
I don't want her turning on TV and seeing dad's like ass, and I don't know, it just seemed classless. Just had a couple red flags, and it's definitely left a really bad taste in my mouth.
So I'm really glad that he's speaking up. I imagine this is not going to go well for him. But what am I looking for? What I'm looking for is that he raises it in a way that is nice, that's not too much of a jerk face, and that she acknowledges that she shouldn't have done that she apologizes. You know what? I shouldn't have done that. I sprung that on you, and I thought in the moment it'd be cute and fun, but looking back, I realized you're right. I shouldn't have just sprung that on you in the moment. That was unfair to you, and I'm really sorry. And then you go to the producers and say, just get rid of that whole scene. All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle, in which I react to The Bachelorette. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.